and correct light perspective, so using light with perspective in order to create our characters. Notice, for instance, everyone has what underneath them regarding light and perspective. What kind of shadow is this, the one that's on the ground? Does anyone remember or know?
Oh, when you drew the ball?
Yeah, you remember if I drew the ball and I showed you how that, all the illusion of shadowing? Yes. Cast shadow, very good. In fact, put +3 on your paper for remembering. That was an obscure thing. A cast shadow. So you'll be seeing more, be ready to see more of these cast shadows. It's actually showing a character within a environment. Again, I've been saying that sort of reoccurring theme that I've been talking about. People in their environments, not just flattened gold leaf kind of people, talking or floating around with each other. Hey, what's up? I'm in a gold heaven, yay. Or with the stigmata things, laser beaming out of wounds. All of that sort of symbolic and abstract language is giving way to much more of a naturalistic and observation-focused, a mathematical, emphasized way of painting and sculpting. So know that even this is not necessarily any longer in grand cathedrals. There's just sort of regular steps, an actual landscape behind them. Characters showing you the scene and what they're doing in the scene. So they're actually doing the actions as opposed to creating symbols. If this were created in the Byzantine context, you might see that Jesus is larger than everyone else. Right? He'd have the big nimbus on. He'd have that stern look on his face, and maybe he'd be holding up the fish in one hand. And around him might be floating people who are involved with the scene, including Peter, maybe with 2 sort of coins next to him. Maybe you would have other characters, but the whole scene would be not integrated. It'd be sort of unintegrated because it would be symbolic. In this case, we're seeing a naturalistic scene where all the characters are having conversation, actually creating a storybook for us. Anything from the Renaissance would be good for the question of narrative. When did you write about narrative in art? Yes?
I think it was during, the quiz for one of our times, right?
Not just the quiz. It was literally your what? Your final. If you remember, your final, and we actually talked about how to map that out and why certain people got the scores that they did. So you should be revising your final, or if you haven't already done so, I recommend it because it is a required sort of grade for semester 2, not just to help you with semester 1. So I'm looking for that. And Friday you'll get your grades and all that kind of stuff, and who's turned in what. And 6 of you have gotten a grade change, so that's cool. Some of you went up 1, so you'll be seeing that as well. So I'll be giving you a semester 1 and 2 update. So I've already sent those in, so you're all set with that. And so let me think of what else. Oh yeah, and then so with narrative, then you can use anything from the Renaissance to sort of help you with that. Narratives don't need writing. Stories don't need writing. Is this a story? Yes. It starts in the center with Jesus clearly represented, unobscured. He's pointing in a direction that moves us to the left. And then we can move back through the painting left to right naturally, like we would reading a what? A book. So left to right is what Western eyes actually do. So you're starting in the center, go left, and then naturally read it to the right as you see pan through the whole scene. So that's sort of the direction and the movement within the painting. Those are principles of design. How does the direction go? For instance, how do we know that it starts in the center? I just said it, so just reiterate. Jesus is in the center, so we know that that's sort of how it started. The character unobscured in the center of the painting. How do we know we're moving left? He's literally pointing to his right. So our left, his right, so that helps us point there. Also, like Lorraine said, the cast shadows are also in the direction there. That might also help with the linear thing. And then we go left to right, typically as a result of our eyes using that like we're reading a book. So we're seeing all the characters here doubting, or I should say, paying. This is Peter paying the tax man. at the end of the scene. Yes?
Okay, so how come they're not wearing robes like the two guys in orange? How come they're not wearing robes like the other
Well,
guys?
these would be like magistrates. And that actually, you bring up a good point, whether you recognize it or not. The question of clothing. What do you notice about the way that the Renaissance painters, for all their naturalism and their narrative structure, what do you notice about how everyone is dressed? Yes.
They're fully clothed.
Did you just say they're sexy?
Yes.
Don't say that about Jesus.
Jesus is sexy.
Really?
Oh God.
Okay. Jesus is sexy. That beard is so in right now. That hipster
It
beard.
is. It's called like a lumberjack.
Yeah, he's got the lumberjack going. He's a carpenter. I mean, good work with wood.
But he was crucified. That's kind of like ironic.
Geez, that escalated quickly. But he was. Okay. I was like, Justin brought up a good point, but then I was like, no, he didn't. Not this time. How are they dressed?
Fully clothed.
Yeah, they're fully clothed. We understand that they are dressed. What do you say? There you go, getting closer. And then what else?
They're similar to the togas.
Okay, perfect. So the chiton, the toga. These are all dressed not as Palestinian Jews. So is this a historical painting? No. This is not a historical painting. For all the naturalism I'm talking about and for all the illusionism and yada yada, this is a what we call an anachronistic. That's a great word to use. If you use that, it's like, ooh, this person knows how to do it. 9 on that essay. They love that.
Really?
Anachronistic. No, not really. You have to do the tasks, but it's really good to have some academic language. So write it down. Anachronistic. You know, like chron, like chronos. C-H-R-O-N. That's in the middle there. Anach, A-N-A, chronistic, I-S-T-I-C. So anachronistic is, we'll try and guess as to what you think anachronistic means. If I say chronos is in the center, that is time. What does anachronistic mean? Yes?
Historically accurate.
It would actually be the opposite of that. So very good. Anachronisms are like that A in the beginning, like achromatic or something like that. It means like not without color. In this case, anachronistic means that it is without sort of correct timeline. So it's sort of the opposite. This is not a historical painting. It is anachronistic. That is, it is using Renaissance dress and, in this case, also Greek dress, combining them together to represent something even further in the past. So there's 3 different timelines. There's the biblical narrative. There's the Greek apostles, quote unquote, that are sort of merged Greek philosophers with Judeo-Christian ideas, which is a perfect representation of the Renaissance. And then you have these characters here who are like the tax people, they're the government, but they represent Renaissance dress. So with the leotard and sort of that half, the half shirt, you know what I'm talking about? The thing where it's like the skirt shirt. Skirt shirts, the skirts that people use, the skirts. Yeah. The what?
No, those are
Skirts. Yeah, there you go. Those are skirt shirts, but yeah, whatever. You get the idea what I'm saying. With the leotard here that's hiding their stuff. This is anachronistic. So just know that you can use the word anachronism or anachronistic to describe anything that's not historical, in that it's using things from modern times. It would sort of be like today putting Jesus in blue jeans and maybe having him work on like a lumberjack or something. I don't know. You kind of set him in an anachronistic timeline in order to represent modern time with the belief system. So know that that is very clear. And as a last painting here that kind of helps us introduce something like the Sistine Chapel, Masaccio's Expulsion from Eden, which is also in what is the chapel's name? Let me pull it back up. The Brancacci Chapel. Sorry about that. It's in the Santa Maria del Carmine in Florence. The Masaccio's Expulsion from Eden is the direct inspiration for Michelangelo and for his painting. So that's sort of why we start with a character that you think is a little bit unknown, Masaccio, because he is the beginning of Michelangelo in a lot of ways. In fact, these characters will be directly copied. Remember I talked about inspiration, imitation, and emulation. These characters are directly copied as a result of Michelangelo studying Masaccio for his color theory, for his characters, etc. So this expulsion from Eden is another biblical narrative in which Adam and Eve have just sinned, they've screwed up, and they get what out of the garden? They get booted out of the garden. This is the angel here blocking the way to Eden as their characters covering themselves up in shame. You see the shame in their eyes, all that kind of stuff. The important thing to know about this particular work, I suppose, besides its imitation from Michelangelo, is the use of figurative gesturing. So our characters are showing emotion. This is sort of Dionysian in nature. So the characters are they're excessive in their emotive states. So we have a human approach to the feeling of suffering. Again, if this is Byzantine, we might use more symbolic language, maybe a clear sword, a flaming sword in the center, and then two people standing almost stoically on either side. It would be a much more abstract picture. In this case, we're feeling the grief of the characters. So that is in part it. And we also have a dynamic balance, I guess. Our characters floating above them, they're walking diagonally across, showing action and movement. Other things to note here is that there's a hazy background. This goes to color theory it's going to be prominent in the Renaissance. Michelangelo loves very, very bright colors and vivid colors. And even though the characters have a sort of a hazy background, which is them using that Roman illusionism kind of language, that atmospheric perspective, our characters are very, very bright in terms of their chroma. The chroma is strong in these works. The color is strong in them, even though there might be some light overtones or hazy atmospheric perspective. Certainly more than what we've seen before. It can get better though. There's a deep relief with light. You can see that there's a clear light source with our character. Again, the cast shadow, as well as what we call a coarse shadow, is right here on the characters. So these are more and more prominent. The shadowing is becoming more and more theatrical. So that atmospheric perspective, make sure to write that down. The feet are on the ground, and that's a symbolic gesture, but it's still very naturalistic. So even though it's on the ground or naturalistic, it's still symbolic. They are stumbling blindly. So that's sort of content discussion. Here is the work that Michelangelo produces on the Sistine Chapel. Notice the similarities. This is the direct sort of predecessor to Masaccio's work. He is using the same kind of cowering gesturing that Masaccio used. So again, imitation and emulation, important to the Renaissance. Artists using other artists. Here's what it looks like in context. There is the tribute money, and then right next to it is Masaccio's expulsion. So the expulsion and tribute is all together, along with all sorts of other paintings. So don't think that it's just one painting. This is very typical of the Italian chapel structures or just their church structures. So stained glass, they are painting frescoes everywhere. So this is going to be the new thing. And notice that this is a normal Gothic sort of icon in the center there. They still have those conservative traits and elements there. And then each one of these represents all sorts of biblical stories painted on the walls of this single chapel. So that's it in backed up a little bit so you see, no, this is a different chapel. No, it's a different part of the chapel. So, and that chapel was put on the map because it had a spill of some wine from the sacrament, and it molded itself to the shape of Jesus' face, and so they had that on display. That's interesting.
Wait,
Actually, see, it's like a face, like a profile of Jesus with a beard, and so the wine spilled and became Jesus, and so then everyone now goes to that church and got all this money because it had this cool thing. It's a miracle. It's been sanctioned and all this kind of cool stuff. So it's very interesting, and maybe a cool sight if you're Roman Catholic, right? For Angelico, it represents the conservative wing. If you were to say who's on the far spectrum, the liberal, maybe the Democrat or whatever, the liberal on one side and the Republican or the conservative on the other, if you're thinking like that. Botticelli, before he was all super religious, which is what happens with Savonarola, like kind of helps convince him that his work is terrible and evil. Botticelli represents the full spectrum of liberal, like just don't do anything Christian. It's all about pagan stuff, even though he does some Christian things too. But it's mostly about the pagan stuff. And then on the right side, it would be somebody like Fra Angelico. So Fra Angelico represents the conservative. Everything's about representing servanthood to Christianity. He paints directly for Dominican monks, which the Dominican order is a very important monastic order, and it was meant to sort of reform a lot of the abuses of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church at the time, is sort of like today, there's a lot of issues about money and where the money goes, and so you think of like Pope Francis, for instance, as like a reformer of a lot of those kinds of things, at least representing a new perspective. Same thing's been happening generationally for centuries now. So a monastic order to try and fix things going on, in particular like the Great Schism, in which you're breaking off from the East and the West, or when we had those two popes at one time, which we don't like to talk about. Strong devotional image. All of his works are devotional in nature. In this case, you have the Annunciation of Mary. Notice that the angel is subservient to Mary. It's still very naturalistic, which is why it places it squarely during the early Renaissance. But our characters are still very subservient to the Christian doctrines. So our characters are conservative in nature. We're in a resting place. It's very meditative. So it's like a cloister. It's like a monastic kind of perspective. Being centered, being in and of yourself, being thoughtful, these kinds of things are the thematic content. So as you venerate while passing before it, this figure of the intact Virgin, beware lest you omit to say Hail Mary. This is sort of an inscription with Angelico's work. Simplicity and serenity are good descriptive verbs to use here. Simplistic, serene, peaceful. Yes?
How come her wings are like colored and striped?
Pretty. I don't know.
Okay.
Good question. I think they're probably naturalistic in the sense that maybe he used anatomy from other birds, but I could be totally wrong. You can ask Siri, why are Fra Angelico's wings so colorful? Maybe that. Come on, Siri, help me out. All right. My invisible Siri. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know. Reflecting the humble and simple nature of the painter's devotion to the church. Unconcerned with the humanism we've been seeing with our other characters, our other painters. Humanism being, again, that the importance of the person or the human. In that case, it would be someone like Botticelli, would be someone that would do humanistic works. Yes? We need to go
thanks
in.
for asking.
Yeah, Lorraine, be quiet. She's allowed to ask whatever she wants. Thank you very much. Beatrice, put plus 5 on your
There's more sweet quiz. No, I'm just kidding.
I know it doesn't work like that. Obviously. I want to focus on doing some touring of the Uffizi. So
Are we going to the last one or a different museum?
we won't go to the Latin again. We're going to go to Norton Simon. All right. So I've already done that. Yay, jumping around. Oh, very good. Before we leave Florence for a second here, I just want to reiterate how important. Oh, that's ugly. That's nasty. This actually was nasty food. Never mind. No, it's not. I don't have any gelato pictures. There's some really good. Oh, maybe that's a gelato picture. No, that's not. Anyways, gelato's really good. This was crap. I don't know why I'm excited about that. I'm like, I don't know why I even put this in. I'm like, oh, that food is good. No, it wasn't. It was like all reheated. So there's a marketplace in Florence where you rub the. Remember I told you like you spin around on the bull's testicle. Picture like good luck. Well, no, this is different. This is actually you rub the nose of the boar, and it represents like the bull market or whatever because it's in front of like a marketplace. Now it just sells cheap purses out in the thing. They're like, hey, buy my Versace. You're like, okay, like $5 or whatever. But it used to be a very important market, like historical marketplace in Florence. There's the Duomo at night. So this is the first of this major Duomo there. Beautiful place. Yeah, it looks strange, doesn't it? It looks almost like wireframes. Yeah.
It's a Rome. Wait, is it not the
It
Rome
looks like
that
something you build in Minecraft now or something, or like it just kind of has that kind of weird, blocky, fake quality to it. I guess it's just the time period. Let's see. I don't care about that. Okay. So that is the early Renaissance. So let's jump over now to the High Renaissance. Literally, see here, I'm jumping. Oh wait, see, jumping to the High Renaissance. Haha. Okay. Jeez. Lame. Lame, Morris. All right. High Renaissance. Awkward transition. Awkward transition. Awkward. No, well, it'll mostly, the High Renaissance will mostly be in Rome, although we'll see some things in other places as well. I already did the Botticelli business. Let's go ahead and look at Scaldarsi. All right. Oops. Okay. So, yeah, it wasn't the Pope. It wasn't the Pope. That's the Papa. It was not Papa. It wasn't the Pope. I don't know why. I love it. It's like Italian. It's not Italian. It's just fake. That's called fake English Italian. So I don't know what you call it. You know, Spanglish is like Spanish English. Italian would be like the Tinglish or something. It wasn't the Pope. Anyways, it was the Pope that helped sort of initiate the High Renaissance. Strangely and ironically enough, because most popes were sort of antithetical to humanism up until the 16th century. But with certain conditions, one of them being Savonarola and sort of that major scare at the end of the 15th century, so all the 1490s or so, people freaking out over the new millennium. And so there needed to be sort of a reaction, almost a progressive step back, like, whoa, you guys are a little crazy, these fundamental crazy nut people. And so the Pope actually pushes in a different direction a little bit. It's the popes that begin the process of patroning important artists in order to promote Christianity again, to revive it, resurge it. Another reason that the Pope is sort of setting up a humanistic infusion of Christianity with Greco-Roman painting styles, that classical revival, is because it needs to compete with what other city-state? The papal states need to compete with which other states? Florence. Florence has got the head up. They have a cool dome. Now they have a major bustling economy. And the papal states can't just sit stagnant and say, buy some indulgences. They need something that's like a draw for people, a beautiful new thing. So that's what we're going to start seeing. So even though that the Pope is not a secular ruler, he has enormous wealth, and he's got to use it. So why not be the place that people go? If you think Roman Catholic, you should think Rome, not Florence. And so that's sort of the thinking behind the Renaissance. The first High Renaissance painter to be commissioned by a pope is Perugino in 1481 to 83 or so by Pope Sixtus to decorate the walls of. I show you this here. It looks from the outside like one of those park bathrooms. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Sort of just a brown terracotta, sort of unordained. What do you think this is? Maybe a cathedral. Maybe it's like the Pope's quarters. Well, you probably don't normally see this perspective of this iconic thing from the High Renaissance, but the interior is what's important. Can you get it? Take a guess now. The interior of this public bathroom, park bathroom, is important. No, it's not a real public bathroom. This looks like a bath, like a big pool. It's not a bath. No. It's a very iconic thing. You've all seen it. The Sistine Chapel. From the outside, it's very unordained. You probably don't ever see it from there. But from the interior, is where we're talking about literally the place in which the Pope is chosen and where he gives his sermons and his declarations and all this kind of important stuff happens in this building. This is the center of Roman Catholicism. And Perugino is commissioned for the first, the walls of the Sistine Chapel. It won't be until later that Michelangelo is commissioned to paint everything else. So Perugino does the side walls here. He's not the only painter of the High Renaissance. There are others as well. But the High Renaissance will start and end in Rome. So I just wanted to let you know it was a Depopa. All right.
I'm sorry, that's what you're joke.
Huh?
No, because
Lorraine? Oh, well, Lorraine has you?
No, you said because.
Yes, it was a joke. Shut up. You're lame. Real quick. If you don't know, if you haven't read the sort of Gardener's chapter yet or started that process, an important identifying feature of the High Renaissance, you can put it in your warm-ups or whatever, is the word sfumato. Sfumato. Sfumato, we've seen kind of started with atmospheric perspective a little bit, where you put some white overlay on things. Sfumato, however, is instead of the frescoing that we've been seeing, is when you start seeing the incorporation of oil paint. And so instead of using white, you use more of like a dark translucent paint, or like a yellowish tone. And so you combine those two things together to create sort of a smoky haze, as opposed to a white atmospheric haze. The difference would be something like literally the haze of a late afternoon or evening versus the haze of more of a sunrise, right? So like the early morning fog is very atmospheric and light, and then in the evening it's more dark, there's a lot of shadows, smoky. So the smoky quality is attempting to create, again, that naturalism to our characters. It's a way to sort of blend the edges so that you don't have crisp definition between one color and the next. It sort of all blends together in order to kind of sense what the eye senses, which I'll talk about in a moment. But just know the word sfumato. And what might be the cause of Leonardo's use of sfumato? These are questions that you need to consider while we introduce High Renaissance. So think about sfumato. Is this using sfumato? No, it's very different. You can see how the difference, if you're talking about Leonardo's work versus Perugino, you have very different artists. So you need to start knowing who's doing what. Perugino is, even though he is working in that same style as Masaccio, that kind of conservative style, we do see how this might relate to High Renaissance. Again, just like Masaccio, all our characters are narrative-based, they're story-based. We start in the center and we can move left to right. And our characters are anachronistic. They are wearing Greek philosophical togas. Okay? This is a representation of Peter getting the keys from Jesus to start the church. What a better painting to have in your Sistine Chapel than to start with the beginning. Peter is the first what? No, he's not even in there. He's not even a gospel writer. Peter is the first pope. So you see here Jesus getting the keys to Peter. It represents Peter being the first pope. Upon this rock, which is the Greek word pietra, Peter, upon this Peter I will build my church, is the defense of Rome. So Perugino is showing Christ delivering the keys of the kingdom to St. Peter. This is the central fresco of the Sistine Chapel. Notice in the back we have a baptistry font, a large baptistry, representing the centrality of the church. Everything is moving towards that. How do we know that all the movement is moving towards this building in the back? We have this sort of weaving tile structure, and we have our foreground elements, which is the central emphasis, and you have the midground elements and the background elements. It's balanced by two arches. So what do you think the symbolic nature of this thing is? We have a central Christian or Roman symbol, this baptistry building.
Well, I kind of want to say unity.
Is this Christian or is this Roman?
Christian.
It's Christian. It's based on Roman principles. But now, are these victory arches Christian or Roman? Roman. So the two are combined in one. This is a very Roman painting, right? Christian symbol is flanked by two histories of Rome. We're still talking about the glory of the Roman Empire secretly, right? Or part of it, or continuation of the Roman Empire through the Christian church. Characters floating around, jumping around in the back, giving us a nice sort of everyday scene, kind of a snapshot. But we also have linear perspective. How do we know? What are these tile lines doing? Yeah, creating the horizon line. We've got a horizon line. Our characters are sort of set up in horizon lines, and Brunelleschi is at work here. He's not the actual painter, but his ideas are being used. So Brunelleschi is being utilized. All his stuff about linear perspective is being used by Perugino. Our colors are very distinct to Italy. So our oranges and our blues, this chroma is a little bit more washed out. So even though I should say, the quality of contrast is at work in all these pictures, including this one here in particular. Blue and orange are opposites on the color wheel. So they brightly pop with each other. They sort of intensely bounce off each other. Your eye sees that and sees it as an intense color. And so color theory will be a big deal, Justin, with Perugino. So make sure you understand color theory, sort of basic elements of that. We'll talk more about how that painting is working within Michelangelo's work. I don't care about Signorelli. I like Signorelli's work because there's all these crazy demons and people falling and stuff. It's kind of interesting because you're using.
White guy right there. She's like, oh my bad.
Yeah, all these nude people falling into hell. Now this is a very different Last Judgment scene than what we saw with the Gothic period, isn't it? Those characters were much more sort of, I guess, stylized. These are very representative of figural and gestural elements. So all these characters would have required people like posing in different things here, all naked. Imagine hiring some nude model to like pose in this sort of state here, like on the ground. All right, I want you to sit on the ground. I want you to stick your butt out like that. All right, cool. Now you look like you're falling, and then paint the person on a wall just like that. You would have painted a cartoon first, and then used that to sort of help you create this huge structure here. But this is a good example of not only that color theory that I'm about to talk about, is these bright, these popping oranges and blues that are so characteristic of the High Renaissance, but also the sort of humanistic nature of the whole scene. All the characters are figural and animated, very Dionysian. Okay. It kind of, yeah.
Not even.
Maybe, yeah, a little bit. I see that. I see what you're talking about. Montefeltro is a cool patron. So that's why I bring him up. He is sort of the military general, but he's also an art patron. And so he's got a sensitive side. You'll see him with his grandkids in a second. But this dude was no sort of wussy. His military expertise was in high demand for both popes and kings. He was sort of hired out or allied himself with people who can pay the most money. And he was a great patron of the arts, just like the Medici family. So Montefeltro. If you're to see his painting here by Piero della Francesca, don't even know who that is. Not important. What do you know? What sort of stands out about his portrait here, or his profile?
His nose.
Yeah. What about it?
It's so weird. Like his nose looks like it's coming off the top of his face.
Yeah. So his nose really should like continue a little bit. Do you think that's like the painter's problem?
Yeah. No, it's actually what he looked like.
It's actually what he looked like, and he's painting it on purpose. This is actually a propaganda picture, even though it looks kind of boring. Montefeltro had a section of his nose removed, in part because it started with battle, but then he just like took he got a little sword to the face, and then he had it actually the rest of it removed, in part because instead of letting it sort of heal, because he wanted to be able to look from both sides of his eyes, like around both areas around his head. That's intense. Like, can you imagine? Because he was worried about assassination all the time. So like might as well take off a part of your nose so that you can look. In part, then you can show people, look, I can see you with both eyes. I can just say, dun dun dun, you know, I know what's going on because I'm superhuman now. I've taken off a chunk of my nose. Weird, right? But so he rather have a chunk out of his nose and not die than I guess look pretty and stay together. But here's him, nice pious with his grandkids in his armor here. But he's still here. He's got that weird nose going on as well in the work. You also see it in this work. He's a patron. He's actually literally kneeling in front of the baby Jesus, which is totally historical. He was there at the time of Jesus' birth. Now, it's anachronistic, right? So again, he'll be a patron underneath the work. Here's what it looks like. Very kind of weird work. But this is sort of one of the introductions to High Renaissance, in part because it has this interesting idea about, you know, a time of day. You can kind of see, this is sort of you wouldn't think if you're a paint, the picture of the interior of a dome, that you'd have it being done in this time of day, and yet the painter is deciding that they want to have most of it in shadow. So I think that's what creates an interesting quality to it, that our characters are represented with this sort of this shadow, this heavy shadow and coarse shadows being reflected in sort of reflective light features of the work. In order to gain spatial clarity, the work has clarity as a result of shading. I don't really like the work, so I don't talk too much about it. Yes?
He's always painted from the side view.
And then he's painted from the side view for that very reason, to show you that nose. He likes emphasize my nose. My painting. Emphasizing my nose. I learned to show people that they can't kill me. This work also from Della Francesca shows that, like Perugino, that sort of, what do you do with a floor? Like a checkered floor, for instance, if you're seeing it almost in next to the horizon line. How does it stretch? How does it fold together in people's eyes? And so he's using this more as a practice in optics than to actually show us anything about the scenes. That's why it looks kind of like a weird, funny, like early computer animation kind of look. You know how early computer animation had weird textures and stuff? In part because that's just sort of how it started, all this weird geometric shapes and whatnot. So what does it look like when you see it in perspective here? He's attempting to create these illusions of space, so he has this checkered kind of thing here. But this is kind of innovative, just like early computer animation was really innovative. So they're attempting to show that kind of very subtle spatial changes as a result of the illusion of color and of foreshortening and this kind of thing. We'll talk about architecture later. I don't want to do that. Oh, and this one's really weird. It's Jesus. But what's wrong with Jesus?
He's
Okay, he's dead. Yes.
He looks so small and stubby.
Yeah, he looks small and stubby. Why?
Because he's, what's it called? He has, oh my god, what's it called? With the holes in the, they're trying to show.
Oh, the hell's it? No, that's not it.
There's a type, there's an actual type that you told us, where it looks like they're crucified.
Stigmata, but that's not stigmata. This is actual Jesus.
No, like,
Oh, this is a painting of Jesus.
no, the thing where, like, you go up, like, the chalk illusion, that thing.
Yeah, it's something to do with the illusions, but why does he look stubby rather than illusionistic or real? Okay, so you're kind of trying to look over the person, but what sort of makes him stubby looking, like he's midget or something?
The legs.
The thing where.
What's wrong with the legs? But why?
I don't know.
The artist.
Yeah, the artist isn't good. We get it. Okay, yeah.
Show a perspective from his feet, and when you get that perspective, it looks like
He never has a beard.
So if you were to just see the feet here, you would want the body to go off in a certain way, and yet it's when you see the top here, it's very different. So so he's combining two perspectives. Number one, that's sort of the problem. So technically, there's nothing wrong with the feet. It's just the feet in relation or in proportion to the rest of the body, because he's using two perspectives. Now, why wouldn't he put the combined perspective together in this type of painting? What would you need to have if Jesus' body were here? What would the feet be doing as they come closer to you?
Hang off the bed.
They would literally go down here. You lose them in the painting. So maybe he's trying to stick them in. So you're just like. It could also be that when something's coming towards you, like in comic books and stuff, what happens to the proportion of that thing to the rest of the body?
It gets larger.
Observe. I guess it would just be Mauricio. Observe Mauricio. No, I don't know. But like,
Are you 50? Are you 14?
no, like look.
Because it gets larger.
Look.
Does it block the face?
What is the similarity between my head and my foot in your face?
Your foot is bigger than your head.
So how does that relate to this perspective being off? What should his feet be doing?
Getting larger.
Yeah, you should have big old inflated balloon feet right in front of your face here. Based on how we started here. Here's an example of that. This is my brother-in-law. This is what it would look like, right? Notice how big the head is and the feet or whatever. That's how it would look similar to that, but of course that looks weird. We don't want to do that. So this is attempting the idea of illusion, but kind of messing it up because you're still trying to show that he's on a bed. You're trying to use that composite view in order to make sense of it. But so the illusionism is still off in that thing. Anyways, that's an example of a weird work that shows them practicing illusion. Anchor dates. These are important things to know from the time period. So you talk about context, historical transition stuff. So these are very important things happening in the past. You guys, most of you don't have haven't done world history yet. So you'll be at a disadvantage unless you know a little bit about what's going on in the world. Here's some examples here. 1492, what happened? Oh, you know the poem and everything. Good. This, really?
No.
1490. Wait.
No.
Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492.
All they told us is like.
What about the natives of Pizza? When you speak in the Queen's Spanish, you gotta say on the little list. La Nina, la Pinta, la Canta Maria. Yes.
I've never heard that unless it was on a Mini Wheat commercial.
Oh, it's on a Mini Wheat?
I haven't done a Mini Wheat commercial.
I have no idea, really? Columbus sailed the ocean blue. No, really? Okay.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, the little wheat was like testing.
Oh, okay.
And then cereal, I tell you,
Let it be known the cereal.
What is the
I
commercial?
remember it was watching.
Yep. You can learn from the TV. 1492, age of discovery, not just Columbus, but sort of that whole mission of getting to other places. Magellan, Francis Drake, wanting to go to other places. You might have learned some of this in 7th and 8th grade, yeah, hopefully you learned about explorers and that sort of thing. Columbus lands in America. Spain has already reconquered Al-Andalus, which is the southern of Spain, from the Moors, which are Muslims, Spanish Muslims in the area. So we had a Reconquista based on Isabella's hyper-Catholicism, reestablishing Christ in Spain. And from the next century or so, Catholic Spain is the most conservative of all the Catholic states in Europe. Italian city-states in 1494 to 1559 are fighting with each other. They're also fighting with the Turks, the Ottoman Turks, so in the east, the Muslim states in the east. Western Europe, so also the south is fighting with the north of Europe. There are constant military campaigns from the Pope himself, including a few crusades. So there are some general elements here within this period of about 60 years. And strangely enough, even though there's warfare, there's still a lot of patronage to the arts. So in part emboldening people to do things to make themselves more important than the other guys. It's sort of a competition. So Florence and Rome are going to compete. We're going to have Milan competing. And people like Da Vinci are actually going to become famous because not only are they painters, but also inventors. And what does Leonardo actually help invent that you would be able to understand now that you know that there was a lot of warfare going on? What are some things that he invents? Weapons. He likes weapons. And so he's actually, he literally is employed by the Milan generals and by the Milan government to not only do water systems in the city, but also build tanks and all this kind of weird, cool stuff that never actually goes off the ground. Literally, he built a helicopter and a hang glider as well. He invented these ideas.
I flew that hang glider.
You did fly that hang glider, yes, in
Wait.
Assassin's Creed. Yeah.
Is it true you made the hidden blade again?
You made what?
The hidden blade again?
The hidden blade? No, that's not true. That's fiction, man.
I mean,
No. Know that 1504 Michelangelo produces the David, so now you can kind of keep it in context here of Age of Discovery, and then these city-states having sort of military campaigns. We know that Machiavelli writes The Prince, which is sort of a dissertation that you will read more about next year. The Prince is potentially a satire on how government structures should work based on how they shouldn't. So the Prince is sort of a dictator trying to manipulate the people. You'll read primary sources on that in world history. In 1517, Martin Luther in Germany is producing the 95 Theses and is going to irreparably split the Catholic Church into Protestants, that is, who protest Catholicism, and those who remain Catholic. And we're going to all forget about the Eastern Church that's still working completely distinct of Catholicism this whole time. But the big thing that happens in Western Europe will be the Reformation. So some stuff going on in the Renaissance. We're starting with Italy, though, with our Italian painters here. Here are they represented with all their perfect ninja attire here. Of course, their leader being Leonardo in the center there, with all their turtle weapons.
Even though that this man's the oldest in that.
That's even though Donatello, you're right, Donatello is technically the oldest, very good. Leonardo will be sort of the central one for the High Renaissance, Donatello being his predecessor. For the High Renaissance, our central characters will be first Leonardo, second Raphael, and then Michelangelo will get on the scene here. Let me show you a little bit of characteristics from these characters. We got 7 minutes, and then we'll continue with them next week. So you'll learn, we'll be touring the Uffizi, doing a quiz tomorrow. Leonardo da Vinci is from 52 to 19, so 1452 to 1519. He is what we call a polymath, meaning is at the time it was sort of like he did everything. He dabbled in all sorts of math and sciences. He was a naturalist. He would go outside and actually view the world and say, how does my eye see things? When I stare at the sun, my eyes want to close. When I look at the ground, after looking at the sky, I can't really see as much. My eyes are changing somehow. And he's trying to then apply that to painting. So we'll go into more info about that. He's also an engineer, an inventor. I mentioned some of his journaling and why he was patroned by Milan, so we'll be talking about that. His clear works, his most important works that we will study, Madonna on the Rocks, his Mona Lisa, and The Last Supper. So those are 3 famous works that are also important to know about Leonardo. By the way, we call him Leonardo, not Da Vinci in art history, because Da Vinci just means he's what? From Vinci, which is a place that he grew up. So Leonardo. We don't say Raphael, Della, wherever he was from. I can't remember. It's like some other word. Same with Michelangelo. He's got all sorts of names after him. So we say it by the first names. Leonardo, Raphael, and Michelangelo. Raphael's the second generation of a very similar time period, a little bit younger, but actually dies close to the same time, so didn't live as long as Leonardo does. Painter and architect. He is going to be a very, much more of like your smooth character. Everyone loved Raphael. He was a good-looking guy. He was very smooth and socially inept, or socially adept. So he really was able to get the commissions, quote unquote.
Wait,
that
so
is the ladies. No, I don't know.
Right.
He was able to do, yeah. Well, no, he was a Catholic and he was fine with it. Maybe he did. I don't know. But his main works are The Marriage of the Virgin, Madonna in the Meadows, School of Athens. Very simple works, but the most important is the School of Athens. All these other works just look pretty because it's Raphael's paintings. He likes lots of blues and deep purples, but his work is very conservative because of his Catholic roots. Now, Michelangelo is going to be the most prolific of these, in part because he lives for almost the whole century, 1564. So we have a character here who, even though he's 20 years younger than Leonardo, he's going to live mostly through all these different movements happening in the 16th century. So he will update himself, and so he'll be very prolific as a result. His works include Michelangelo's P.1, which is a beautiful sculpture in the St. Peter's Basilica. Michelangelo's David, his Moses, the Sistine Chapel frescoes, and tons of lots of sculptures, but those are the most important. His big thing is that he believes himself to be a painter and he values himself as a sculptor, not a painter. But this might have all just been a ploy, an advertising ploy, his self-deprecation. He represents sort of the brooding artist, the one who's always like, my work sucks, don't look at it kind of thing. He was saying that all throughout his painting of the Sistine Chapel. My work sucks, don't look at it. And everyone's like, what are you talking about, Michelangelo? It's beautiful. He's like, no, it's terrible.
Well, it kind of
I hate it.
I only had to look at was his
Michelangelo, you're wonderful. Please come back. No, I don't think I can. Yes, you can. Here, have money. So, all right, maybe I will. Yeah. So he viewed himself as a sculptor, not a painter. Oh yeah, there's the other.
Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah, I love that man. So those are your three things. Let's look at Leonardo. Look at Leonardo. We'll look at that on Monday. So we'll start with Leonardo, his formal stuff. These characters are super important, but I will go through them quickly. It'll be up to you to expand on them from your reading in the text. Go ahead and we didn't get to talking about questions in your. I thought I was going to get a little bit of time to activity. We'll do that first thing on Monday. Feel free, though, to start your speak outs if you want this weekend. Identify a question, and then you'll be all ready to go on Monday with it. Again, tomorrow we'll do the APAH part. We'll do a field trip to Florence. A real, live, digital, fake field trip. All right. So pack up your bags. We're going on an airplane of the mind. Okay.
Actually, I've been to the house that girl.
Anne Frank? You went to that? Oh, that's cool.
No, I wasn't there.
Is it a virtual tour?
I know.